Toronto's outer suburbs, Detroit's, Calgary, Phoenix, Edmonton, Dallas, cul-de-sacs, front garage houses on 50-foot lots, strip malls. From the air, you genuinely cannot tell which country you are in. Two nations that pride themselves on being different built their suburbs from what looks like the same blueprint. That was not a coincidence. In 1944, Ottawa made one policy decision that all but guaranteed Canadian suburbs would become copies of American ones. In the summer of 1944, as returning veterans and a swelling population strained Canada's housing supply, Ottawa passed a law that would quietly reshape the country's cities for generations. The National Housing Act received royal assent on August 15, 1944. Its language was anything but subtle about its inspiration. The title page, still preserved in the archives, spells it out. It says, "In view of the successful results obtained under the Federal Housing Administration in the United States, the Government of Canada proposes to adopt a similar system of mortgage insurance to stimulate private home building." Behind this move was a small circle of policymakers, led by economist C.A. Curtis. Curtis chaired the Federal Subcommittee on Housing and Community Planning, which met through 1943 and 1944 to map out a response to the housing crisis. In their final report, dated March 24, 1944, they made three bold recommendations: create a central mortgage insurance agency, adopt a catalogue of standardized house plans, design subdivisions for automobile access. Every one of these ideas came straight from the United States playbook. Section 8 of the Act gave the Minister of Finance sweeping powers to insure housing loans in a manner analogous to the insurance provisions of the Federal Housing Administration of the United States. This was not just a nod to American policy, it was a direct transplant. The regulations set out 25-year amortizations, 10% down payments, and strict criteria for which homes could be insured, echoing the Federal Housing Administration's formulas almost word for word. The new law also authorized the creation of the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC. By early 1946, CMHC was up and running, with William R. Miller as its first president. The agency's founding memos, still on file, instructed staff to use the Federal Housing Administration's underwriting schedules as the basis for all insured mortgages. The message was clear: Canada would not experiment with its own path. Instead, it would build its post-war suburbs using the same financial logic and design standards that had already begun to sprawl across the United States. This decision set the stage for everything that followed: the uniform subdivisions, the car-first street grids, and the legal exclusion of other housing types. It was a conscious choice, written into law, that would determine not just how Canadians lived, but what their cities would look like for decades to come. On a single sheet of paper, the future of Canadian suburbia was drawn out in lines and measurements. The National Housing Act Blueprint Catalogue, compiled by Town Planning Consultants Limited between 1945 and 1947, distilled federal policy into something builders could order by mail: a library of standardized house plans, each engineered for rapid assembly on a 50-foot lot. These blueprints were not just technical drawings. They were the physical template for a new kind of neighborhood. Every page in the catalogue set out the same formula: a 50-foot frontage, a front-facing garage, and a building footprint just under 1,200 square feet per floor. The garage sits right at the street, a deliberate nod to the automobile's place at the center of post-war life. A memo from E.R. Arthur to C.A. Curtis in September 1945 states that the front garage layout was chosen to stimulate demand for road infrastructure and to justify municipal investment in widening avenues. The minimum lot width, 50 feet, was not just a round number. It was the narrowest dimension that could comfortably fit a car, a driveway, and leave room for future road expansions. Inside the catalogue, 12 prototype plans are laid out, each available for $15. The designs are modest, 1 or 2 stories, prefabricated timber framing, brick veneer, and windows sized for mass production. There is no allowance for shops on the ground floor, no space for walk-up apartments or corner stores. Every house is strictly residential, echoing the single-use zoning logic that would soon sweep across Canadian cities. Setbacks are rigid, 20 feet at the front, 10 feet at the rear, 5 feet on each side. The uniformity is intentional, creating streetscapes where every house sits at the same distance from the curb, each driveway opening directly onto the road. The catalogue's authors, a handful of planners and architects contracted by Ottawa, became the quiet designers of everyday Canada. Their blueprints standardized not just construction, but the very rhythm of suburban life. A car in every driveway, a lawn between every house, and neighborhoods built for speed and sameness. What looks like natural sprawl from above is in fact the result of a reproducible, state-sponsored template, one that made it easy for developers to build fast, banks to lend safely, and municipalities to plan for endless outward growth. The National Housing Act Blueprint Catalogue did not just fill a housing gap. It set the stage for a country that would grow outward, one identical lot at a time. Regulation 30-3, issued by the newly formed Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation in early 1946, spelled out the rules in plain language. Mortgage insurance was available only for homes built on land that had not been used for residential purposes in the past 10 years. In practice, this meant insurance, and the low down payments and long amortizations that came with it flowed almost exclusively to greenfield developments. The financial logic was hard to ignore. Banks, protected by a 0.5% insurance premium, could lend with minimal risk. Developers, in turn, found it far easier to secure financing for new subdivisions on the urban fringe than for any project within existing city limits. Renovations, conversions, or higher density infill simply did not qualify. A CMHC underwriter's memo from 1947 put it bluntly: the intention is to favor new construction on unbuilt land, as this reduces risk and increases the value of municipal assessments. That value was real. In Ontario, a single hectare of greenfield development generated an average of $12,000 in development charges, money that flowed straight to municipal coffers. Compare that to infill, which often brought in nothing but headaches and, at best, a fraction of the revenue. For towns and suburbs, the incentives lined up perfectly. More new lots meant more property tax revenue, more infrastructure spending justified, and a steady stream of insured mortgages to fuel the next round of growth. The blueprint was not just a design template, it was a financial engine, rigged to reward outward expansion and lock in the uniform, car-oriented pattern that would soon blanket the Canadian landscape. A single line in a zoning bylaw can shape the way a city grows for generations. In the wake of the National Housing Act, provinces and municipalities across Canada began to write R1 into their codes, shorthand for single-family only. The clause was simple. Only detached houses were allowed, each on its own lot, with a minimum frontage of 50 feet. That one rule had enormous consequences. It made it illegal to build the kinds of homes that had once filled older neighborhoods, walk-up apartments, townhouses, and corner stores with flats above. Urban historians call this missing middle housing. It is everything between a single house and a high-rise. Dr. Margaret Leclerc, who has spent years studying Canadian zoning, puts it plainly. The missing middle is the legal gap between a house and an apartment block. It is the duplexes, triplexes, and small walk-ups that make a city walkable and affordable. Before the war, neighborhoods like Montreal's Plateau Mont-Royal and Vancouver's West End offered exactly that mix. Four-story walk-ups, brick row houses, and street-level shops created dense, vibrant streets where daily life happened on foot. But after 1945, the new zoning rules drew a hard line. If a lot did not meet the 50-foot minimum, it could not be built on. If a building had more than one unit, it was forbidden. The legal map of the city now matched the blueprint. One house, one lot, one family at a time. What looks like a natural shortage of housing options is, in fact, the result of a policy choice. A gate locked by law, not by accident. Most Canadians get behind the wheel for nearly every trip. According to the Canadian Urban Institute, 78% of all daily journeys are made by private car, a number that rivals the United States and stands in sharp contrast to European cities. In the suburbs, transit is more of a last resort than a real option. Buses often arrive only every 30 to 45 minutes, making it hard to rely on anything but a personal vehicle. The result is a built-in dependence on cars, reinforced by decades of design and policy that made driving the default. But the cost of this convenience is starting to come due. The Canadian Urban Institute estimates that the bill for replacing aging suburban water, sewer, and road infrastructure built between 1945 and 1975 will reach $140 billion over the next 20 years. That is not just a distant municipal headache, it is a looming price tag for taxpayers across the country. These numbers do not just reflect pipes and pavement, they represent the long-term cost of a system set up to spread out, not to last. Meanwhile, cities like Copenhagen took a different route. In 1947, the Danish capital adopted the Finger Plan, laying out compact, mixed-use neighborhoods along rapid transit corridors. Today, most trips there are made by bike or public transport, and the infrastructure burden is lighter, more sustainable. The Canadian model, by contrast, locked in a cycle of car dependence and expensive upkeep, a policy shortcut that became a permanent feature of daily life. Canadian suburbs aren't just echoes of American sprawl, they are the product of conscious decisions about policy, finance, and identity. Today, as cities wrestle with housing, climate, and livability, those choices still define what is possible. The blueprint isn't destiny, but it's the ground we build on. Share your thoughts below.